Kid of Arcadia, Chapter 22, For My Own Good. I woke when my head hit the floor. At some point during the night I had made my way to the top of the stairs and had fallen asleep sitting there, leaning on the door. The second it was pried open, I toppled out at my kidnapper's feet. He dragged me out of the way and gave me a foldable lawn chair to take down with me and a few more blankets. My watch said it was like 4:45 a.m. He left for another minute and returned with a portable television, left again, and came back with some pillowcases packed with snacks and pop, and I just stood by as he went to work arranging the place for me. He hooked all the electronics up and tossed a few blankets on the lawn chair, calling it my bed. I didn't say anything about what I'd found down there. Not yet. I wanted to see what else I could learn from him first. He told me that while I'd been stored away that night, he'd been taping up the busted door back at the house when Guess Who returned, and this time stacked for a fight. With a baseball bat in his hand, he said he cracked the fucker's wrist with one swing and then clubbed the other guy. When that one fell to the ground, his partner hopped back into the pickup to drive off, only to get a face full of glass when he smashed his bat through their side window. And that was that. The whole brawl had gone down in the dark before they both sped off. Or at least, that's what he told me. In short, he said, they probably weren't coming back now, but there was no way to be sure yet. Are they going to tell the cops? I asked. Kid, they're taken care of, and so are you. That's all you need to know. They took it all. I got nothing now. Not even you. If they bring the cops around, they only incriminate themselves. You're safe here. Trust me, he explained. He joked that the best and worst part of it was just that they'd made off with his whole collection of tapes and spreads while they were at it that day. He was safe from the law now, but I knew those tapes had meant a lot to him. He didn't blame me for any of it, but I knew he'd lost a lot of himself in losing those tapes. He'd lost all of his boys, and now I was all he had. I sat down on the lawn chair as he hooked up the television for me, and I remember actually being impressed by his tale of the fight and how he had handled it, still anxious about what was going to happen. There was no way he was letting me back at his house at that time, regardless of what he said, so I'd be stowing away in the basement of his work until further notice. He told me to just lie low, and he assured me once again that he'd totally taken care of the two men and that I could probably just forget about them and enjoy myself down there, but I knew he still wasn't being completely honest. That day he wouldn't be coming to work, and it was more than obvious he was staying back at the house to scare off any more thugs, but I didn't say anything. Flicking on the workshop light revealed just how badly he'd been injured during the brawl. He now walked with a limp and held his side, but said it was nothing. I'm not locking this door now, he told me, so you can leave at any time. The bathroom's up here in the workshop. I'm not holding business hours today, and my partner's going to get the message too, so don't expect any visitors. Try to stay in the basement just in case. Don't break anything. Don't answer the phone or let anyone in. I'll be back with more stuff. When? I asked. The man gave me a worried look, rubbed his side, and left without another word, closing the door behind him and brushing back across the workshop to the outside. The metal door banged shut after him. I was all by myself once again. I adjusted the TV antenna so I could at least pick up some of the basic channels, even if they were covered with a dusting of static. Just to give me some company in the room, like when I was a kid, and tried to relax on the fold-out chair, which was surprisingly comfortable with the blankets. I also tried to eat some chips, but they were nauseating. Though I could watch all the TV I wanted, I spent too much time sitting there thinking about Eliot, Kelly, Broder, and Gus, perhaps the four people who meant the most to me in the world. Even through the paranoia, Gus stayed on my mind the most because I was weak and needed someone. It's always been a weakness that kids need someone to parent them, and I was no different when down like that. Certainly no leader like he'd convinced himself I was. As far as I was concerned then, I was just another kid like Broder, who had allowed some creep to screw his life up. Gus surely must have let the space heater get to him that fall. When it had scrawled its orange light across the rug in the dim space of the tiny bedroom, that hearth became all too welcoming and believable. There was something welcoming about our captor, I had to admit, even though it felt wrong to say. I couldn't keep my thoughts tied to the basement. I thought about what Gus and I would have done together had he been allowed to stick around. That fall we had the freedom to do whatever we wanted. We could have climbed the surrounding hills and followed every trail across the ridges and peaks, tossed rocks over the steep sides and picked out the animal tracks. The town and its rural back roads hadn't driven all the wild things out yet for sure. From that height we could have seen the sunset like no one else, and atop the hills could have waited in the cold for the sky to turn over pink and the sunlight to glow orange on the rocks like real mountain men. But now we were trapped. Just the thought of this reminded me of the parable of the back window and the kid who crawled out of it much too often. "How does that one go?" I imagined Gus asking from inside the portable TV set. My mind was racing as I rolled on the lawn chair in a spell, and my heart pounded its head against its own cellar walls. Maybe tonight I'll just ditch this place. Or maybe he'll ditch me somewhere I can't come back from, I thought. I was ready to take anything the others had taken from this guy, if only for solidarity's sake. It seemed inevitable for me at that point. I fell asleep for a good number of hours, and when I finally stirred awake, I saw that man had been there and left already, leaving fast food on the workbench against the wall. Though I was starving, I refused to eat it. I wanted this guy to start feeling guilty about what he was pushing on us boys, about his indifference to all he had put us through, and most of all, I wanted him sorry for whatever he'd done to Gus. My anger with him built until he finally showed himself again at the top of the stairs around 5 a.m. the following morning. He told me I could go with him this time. I hadn't seen daylight for 2 days, and was growing too sick to be hungry anymore. On the way back to the house, he said I couldn't stay at his work while they had clients there, and that I should be safe back at his place by then, but he also said that he was leaving his car in the driveway just in case. He told me he'd actually reported the break-in to the police and that now they were driving by from time to keep an eye on the house. He said there'd be no issues about me being there as long as I stayed low and kept the curtains shut, and that he'd made an arrangement with his partner to drive him to work that day. "Why are you even going to work today?" I asked. "Because I don't want anything to look strange today, that's why, just in case. You'll be safe here, for today at least. Tomorrow I might have to bring you in with me. The cops are driving by keeping watch, so don't go outside," he said. When his partner arrived and honked in the driveway, the man gave me another worried look, rubbed his side, and left without a word. I listened as their car pulled away and shivered from the dread of being back in that house all alone again. There was no way I was as safe as he was trying to convince me I was, and I had to find some way to relax when I saw the bloodied bats still sitting in the sink. I rolled myself a blunt. Did he really kill those guys? I wondered. I kept an eye on the window with the pulled shades all morning just in case anyone showed up, sat back on the couch, and smoked up the last of his side table stash to ease my mind. The frost slowly melted as the sun spun its shadows all around outside the whole time I was toking. The more I toke that morning, the easier it was to keep toking, and since I'd never downed a whole blunt before, I wasn't prepared for the amount I was taking in. I thought at the time it'd help make me light on my heels if I had no escape, because I always felt so fearless when I toked, but what had started out as a way to relax really began possessing me the more and more I got lost in the haze. Just knowing that there were police out there watching the house while I was there also gave me some comfort that day. So I ate the house out of bread. I actually stripped my shirt and pants off when my sweat started sticking them to my skin, and I meant to put on new clothes but didn't get around to it. I saw how scary thin I was. My hunger still had me on the floor with my dream journals that still lay scattered on the rug. That picture of Eliot still rested face down in the corner where I'd thrown it days earlier. In the bathroom I decided to take control. His razor sent hot vibrations up every muscle in my arm, and I shaved that peach fuzz off my cheeks and upper lip, and even my hairless pits, so that in a matter of minutes I could be smooth again for him. The hairless spots burned in a rash of red dots wherever those blades hit the skin, and it tormented me, so I threw myself down on the rough old burn-hold stained burlap of the couch cushions again, and slowly thrust my body against the material to scratch the itch away as the day turned into night and the stupor slowly wore off. My stomach rumbled like a sputtering engine on fumes, and I teased a while, chomping on the cushions and soaked them with spit in my madness. That day I just lost the will to go on fighting. I was prepared to submit to whatever would come next, good or bad. I had no control. The blunt and my paranoia just made everything seem pointless. "Guess you found it," the man said. His words came thundering through the darkness of the living room, He flicked the lights on and then had his eyeful right then and there, as I was totally naked. I sat up and shook my head, trying to dislodge some of the drowsy lightheadedness in the pot funk of the room, and toppled to the floor when I tried to stand. I didn't, want to do the whole thing, I said. I was peering up from the carpet to see him standing tall over me with his boots now just inches from my nose. He raised one of them and pushed my face down to the floor with it. Okay, nudie. You know what? Let's both play get stoned and fuck around just to see what happens. Do you really trust me that much, or do you just not care anymore? He squatted to my level and stared at my squinted red eyes, and I lifted up to kneel before the couch. I gave him a dopey smirk and rested my chin on my arm that I had poised on the seat cushion beside me. I couldn't understand why he was flipping out, especially since we'd been digging through his stuff for months. Maybe now it was different only because there was a real threat out there for once, but even that I was no longer sure about. I just watched him as he paced the room, trying to pick up some clue on how guilty he was feeling about what he'd driven me to do, about what he'd done to me. After a minute in the corner with his back to me, he raised one of his hands to his mouth and turned around with an all-new, relaxed expression. How did you know I was telling the truth about you being safe? Why wouldn't you think I was lying? He asked. I just really don't care anymore, man, I said. He ordered me to at least put my underwear back on, and the second I did, he yanked me toward the kitchen by the arm. I smiled at first, thinking I had finally called his bluff about how safe I was, almost enjoying his use of pretend force as he brought me around to the closet, where he pulled down his rope and duct tape, stored way too conveniently together on the top shelf. Then he worked quickly, mumbling through each little step as he began tying a knot around a small noose, slipping it around my arm and tugging it tight until it pinched my wrist. I stood patient and puzzled all the while, letting myself step limply into his little game wherever he pulled, and waiting to call him out on whatever he was now going to threaten me with. He had no idea I'd been through all this once before. Since you're so fond of running, you don't get to run out on me this time. Not unless you want to lose your hand, right? I'm tying you up in the basement. Maybe then you'll learn that I don't play around, he said. I wasn't scared of him. He tugged, and I had no choice but to follow him around to the kitchen table where he kept the silverware in the cabinets. The bloodied bat still sat in the sink there. He pulled a drawer open so fast that a few forks and spoons flew out and clanged on the floor behind him. Then he drew out his long knife. I swear I could see my reflection in it. Suddenly none of this seemed like such a joke anymore to me, whatever he was doing. I was too dopey from the blunt, though. You'd really hurt your own safety just to stick it to me, kid? How much am I worth to you? Your life? Are you that sick in the head? Why do you make me do this? He asked. What are you gonna do, man? My eyes flew open, my jaw dropped, everything came into focus. I'm giving you a chance. Cut yourself free, you little shit. Here's the fucking knife. He propped my arm over the sink and pressed all his weight onto that flimsy bone to hold it there. What? I asked, trying to tug my arm back. The skin of my pinned arm tingled as the circulation drained and the whole thing fell into pins and needles. I tugged harder from the shoulder to tear from his grasp, but he reached up to twist the bulb over the sink to give us more light with his other hand. He wasn't letting me go, nor would he, I was sure. Well, if you don't cut it, I will, he grunted. He raised the knife on high like every psycho in every slasher film I'd seen. He was going to do it. My heart leapt. My head turned away. My eyes slammed shut. Wait! I shouted. In a pure reflex, my free arm flew up and my trembling fingers locked around his knife-bearing arm with enough force to squeeze the life out of a small animal. He drew back as my sharp nails dragged into his skin, and he dropped the knife to go clanking on the floor behind him with the other silverware. The weight on my other arm let up and I wriggled it off the sink to bring it closer to my body, sheltering it with my free arm. It still dangled on the end of that rope, though. Don't! I yelled. My brain hadn't computed what had happened yet, and when it did, I burst into tears. I cried like a brat. I didn't want to lose my hand. See, you don't trust me as much as you think you do, huh, little fucker? That'll teach you. You think I'd go through all that work to tie you up if I was just going to let you cut yourself free? He yelled, like he was just being a good parent and teaching me this lesson. I opened my eyes, ready to pounce. Why'd you do that, you monster? My voice cracked in its adolescent whine, and I stopped my foot in a tantrum. I almost fell backwards and had to prop myself on the counter so I could rub my eyes with my palms. Yeah, I'm the monster, he laughed. He nodded at his bloodied arm and rolled his eyes like it was still some big joke. I didn't tell you that I'm a great actor, too. I just wanted you to give a shit, you asshole. I cried in a high shout, trying to increase the distance between the two of us by staggering around to the opposite wall as far as the rope would let me go. When I reached the end of the line, I violently tugged it, trying to rip the duct tape with my teeth. He didn't let the rope budge. Obviously, I was still high as a kite. Why do you want me to do that? I'm not your dad, kid. You chose to be here, he said. I didn't choose this, I said, sobbing. Come on, Jared. I'm not going to hurt you. I was never going to hurt you. Boys like you just have to learn the hard way, he said. I was shocked that he had said my name. He lurched slowly around the table toward me, and as the line grew slack, I backed away, still holding my hand close to my chest. It quickly began losing strength, and the pins and needles stung every time I yanked it closer. He made no sudden movements other than to rub the patches of broken skin and blood off his forearm. I backed all the way around the table to the wall where his coat hung by the kitchen door, raised both arms like every junkie hit with the spotlight, and waited for him to smack or pinch me or just do anything to hurt me. I pressed my back against the wall and tried to block any possible blows. For those minutes, it was the woods all over again. Good. See? You're afraid of me now. You don't trust me. That's how it should be. Reach in the pocket of my coat. You can have control of the keys. It's the gold key that opens the basement door behind you. Let's go put you away where you can't cause yourself any more trouble, he said. Since he had me cornered, I silently obeyed, and without taking an eye off him, reached down into his leather jacket and pulled out a heavy keychain with my free hand. I flipped to the gold one, stuck it in the knob, and the door to the infamous basement opened effortlessly. He staggered behind me and threw his bloodied arm around my neck, but all the juices from my stomach surged up my throat and I almost threw up right there on the floor because of that. He stepped closer and pushed me toward the stairwell behind me, but I cowered at the threshold, tucking my head low on my shoulders like a frightened dog, too terrified to disobey but too hesitant to comply. Please, just don't make it hurt. Don't make it hurt, please, I begged, tearing up, and then started down the stairs. My mind flashing back to Broder in the woods and the pain. I was trembling, but I had no choice. I could almost feel a knife plunging in any second. My heart raced as I fumbled down in the cold darkness. I wondered if I'd live to see the bottom, and if what I was seeing were the last sights Josh and Gus ever saw. I wondered if I'd find them both dead down there. Relax, I wasn't gonna hurt ya, he said. You were gonna cut me, I sobbed. No, I wasn't. That was just a game. I thought you liked playing games. Why would I cut up something as beautiful as you? He laughed, mocking and shoving me playfully. When we reached the bottom of the stairs, he tugged on the pull string and the lights shot on. The first thing I noted was the absence of any dead bodies or any bloodstains down there. In fact, the room was better furnished than the rest of the house. A wide white rug stretched over the concrete floor with some white leather furniture, old computers, and camera equipment. The opposite wall held a series of wooden shelves against the concrete, all painted white under a ceiling maze of crossboards, wires, and old pipes. A few directional lights were screwed in on a track on the ceiling. Everywhere that familiar basement mildew smelled to me brought all my senses back in time. He pushed me a little farther inward and invited me to kick back on his white couch against the wood-paneled wall. Then he let my leash drop to the floor. Immediately I felt like bolting back up the stairs with the keys, knowing what was probably coming, but then he dropped the bombshell. I was reading your journal the other day, he said. Now I was curious. Why did he care enough to read my dream journal? I was still ready to run at a moment's notice, but there must have been some reason he brought that up. Want something to drink? He asked, now standing with his back to me to open a mini-fridge. It'll calm your nerves. I got some pop in here, bud. I could feel the mini-fridge's chill where I sat on the couch and shook all over as I wiped my tears. I was still in my briefs after all. He gave me a Coke. He'd taken the first sip to show me it wasn't going to land me on the floor if I drank it, and seemed to get a kick out of my presumed paranoia over it. Look at you, all scared shitless now. It's a wonder how a little discipline goes a long way. Amazing. It always worked for me when I was your age, he said, chuckling. It's not funny, I retorted. He rushed me suddenly just to tickle me for a split second as a joke, but I just sunk further into the couch. That made him laugh. From his pocket he took out a switchblade and cut the rope from my hands, freeing me completely. "See, it's not so bad down here. Want this to be your room? I'll make it nice just for you," he said, massaging my bare shoulder. Then he stood and walked over toward a crawl space in the wall where all his camera parts rested on a few folding chairs. A metallic suitcase sat on the concrete by a reclining chair, with a handful of rounded black lenses and a zip black pack beside it. I drank a few sips from the Coke bottle and set it beside me on the foundation. I was waiting just for the right moment to run up the stairs with his keys and lock him down there. "Weren't you taking me back to the shop tonight?" I asked, trying to distract him with questions. "Why? I'm here to protect you now." "I lost everything, my young friend. Nothing is left. I'm going to start over with you. Here, let me just get all this junk out of here," he said. He bent down next to the recliner to open up the metallic suitcase, flipped the brackets, and pulled out a tripod. All three of its legs extended to the floor at an even height, and then he began digging in the leather bag for something I'd never get to see. He seemed like he was ignoring me with his busy work of tidying the room, as if turning it into a bedroom for me meant more to him than anything since they took everything else. "How long have you been doing this stuff?" I asked. "Too damn long, kid," he said. "What made you like this?" I asked. A limp basketball sat beside me, so I propped it in my lap. I yawned and rested my head and arms on top of it, feeling exhausted all of a sudden. How the hell should I know? Being in that tiny basement with him felt eerily like catching myself in a mirror. Moments like that, you suddenly see yourself like everyone else sees you, and you either dig what you see or recoil at the moment of truth. I couldn't stop throwing questions at him, just to see if what I saw was a true reflection. I was quickly losing the ability to get out of there the longer I stayed, but the longer I stayed, the more I learned. "So, you're not into women?" I asked. "No. Why?" he asked, packing things into a box. "I just want to know. Why, so you can turn me in? Like I care what you tell the cops. Let them throw me away. It's only a matter of time, anyways. You don't think I know that? Sooner or later one of you guys will turn me in. Probably going to go to jail just for what I did to those guys the other night. I'll probably end up in the newspaper. I'll go make everybody all over the county scared of my face. Go make everyone who knows me wonder why they ever did. I don't have much longer in this world. You only live once, so fuck it." "Do you really have sex with—" I asked, knowing he wouldn't lie about that. I thought of Broder. He screwed in a directional floodlight bulb on the ceiling behind the camera, and a precise beam of intense light sprayed down on me. In my temporary blindness, I couldn't figure whether he needed it to better see me or if he just wanted to keep me from seeing him. I squinted in the light. "No," he explained. "I love you guys. I really do. And all my boys come back. Josh always has. Ask him. He loves me. None of them ever turned me in. And I went easy on your blonde friend, Orpheus, once he drank what you just did. He's fine. He's in a better place. He won't remember much." "Orpheus?" I asked. "That's what I named him, because he loved music. I named you Pan. That little imp god describes you perfectly," he said. He sat on the end of the couch beside me and wrapped his arm around my shoulder in some groping alien way that made my skin crawl, so I turned my head down to the floor and rubbed my elbow with my opposite hand. I crossed my arms and tried to gulp down the awkward sickness of being so near to him as he slowly began running his hand up and down my back and around my waist before creeping it gently up my thigh. All I could do was breathe a heavy, panicked sigh. With all my senses heightened, I answered with a slow nod and looked away. "You have the most beautiful hair." He sniffed my head and ruffled my shaggy black mop like Broder used to do, and I just couldn't stomach it anymore. I pushed him aside and jumped off the couch with the keys still in hand and bolted back up the stairs. At the top, I slammed the basement door shut and frantically locked it as he came pounding up after me. The door banged and the knob twisted furiously, but I held on with all the strength I could to keep it shut until I pulled the key out and backed away, not sure what to do next. I bet he hadn't let the others have the keys. "Open this up, Jared," he shouted. "Why do you do this shit, man?" I shouted back. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked from the other side. Listen, I got no idea why kids like you always seem to end up with guys like me. No one ever will. It's just how the whole system works. Let's just leave it at that, okay? Satisfied? Now open this door, Jared, please. You're making a scene. What, you can't help it or something? I asked. I began to wonder if he had ever really intended to go through with whatever he was doing down there, since he wasn't in any hurry to tie me up or whatever. He had seemed more interested in playing with his equipment, as if buying time for something else. I was sure of that even then. I can help it, I just choose not to. I don't know why, he said, and I heard him slumping down against the other side of the door, defeated. Jared, are you still there? I had no intention of letting him out, and was already about to walk away, grab my things, and hit the road for good, wherever it would take me. I was prepared to go buy that bike and get way the hell away from there. I was prepared to even go turn myself in, but the weight of the air was holding me down. I don't think he expected me to be letting him out either. Hey, asshole, I'm leaving. You hear me? I'm going for good. I don't care if they lock me up, I shouted. You'll find that hard to do, I hope you know, he said. You're just saying that so we'll open this. Fine, don't believe me. I don't care. Just listen. I read what you wrote back in May, in that journal of yours. That picture was your brother Eliot, right? He asked. I blushed, feeling woozy, and he went silent for about a minute. As I hung on the door, I could only imagine what he was doing behind it. Maybe he knew another way out of there. I don't know. But he didn't seem too worried about it. Those were my dreams. I wrote them down, I said. What about what you wrote in May? With you feeling like a monster for something you did or something? I struggled to keep my head up and gave it a shake to try to regain focus. Everything felt like one of my spells, just so surreal that he'd even be talking about Eliot. To this day, I don't even remember if it happened that way, since at the time all I felt like doing was falling back on the kitchen floor and drifting off to sleep on it. I leaned back as if to lie down, but caught myself, so I rested my forehead on the door and closed my eyes. He was my half-brother. My dad loved him more. I wrote that. It was about how they said I was pushing him around and stuff. How I hurt him, I said. Your dad. Fuck, he said. He went silent for another minute, and I could hear him wince, like he'd strained his fight wounds too much chasing me around. Then he went all honesty on me. I can't believe this shit. I think I get you now. Did they really have you thinking that because you pushed around your kid brother or whatever the hell you did, that you're some kind of monster? Is that what your problem is? Them people? If that's what they got you thinking, do yourself a favor right now and put that out of your head. You are not that. You're not going to turn out like that. You're going to be a man, Jared, and you're going to deal with it like one. Jesus. I don't know if it was the lightheadedness obscuring my ability to comprehend him, but he actually sounded like he was giving me advice or something. Suddenly it felt like I'd been running from a sickening beast all this time, just to let it pick at me from behind, and I knew if I kept that up I'd be as consumed as he was in it sooner or later. I remembered my mom's words that last night I was with her, and how she always knew me better than I knew myself, and that made me wince too. The whole time I was rapidly losing the ability to think. Damn it to hell, the man grunted. Look what they do to you kids. Turns my stomach, he exclaimed, perhaps just trying to keep me at the door. It hurt when they broke you guys up, didn't it? You and your dad, your mom, your kid brother. That must have hurt you, made you very angry. Angry like you had to punish them. Right, bud? He said. I knew he was in a lot of pain from how he gasped and hissed. My arms began losing strength and my head felt all spinny. My eyelids were growing heavy, and it felt like I was losing all muscular form, as if melting. The second I closed my eyes, I was hurling through space, and the pull of gravity on my head felt like a 10-pound weight as I fell back into the black all around. The ceiling spun into order when I reopened my eyes. What's wrong with me, man? I asked. Nothing. It's just a good sedative. Pretty soon you'll be totally out of it, dreaming a genie. So you better open this up if you want to get out of here, he said. I decided I ought to do just that, since I didn't know if I was dying that minute or what, and figured he could do nothing for me from behind the door even if he wanted to. So I twisted the key with all my strength I had left and fell down on my hands and knees. He instantly pushed the door open and jumped up on his feet. I heard the floor creaking like he was pacing the living room. I couldn't see straight anymore. I sat up to try to kneel, but found it harder to do than it had been just 10 minutes earlier. I staggered around as all the objects doubled up in my eyes, but then collapsed onto my chest. "Hey, wait!" I tried to yell. He stomped back over to me with all the clothes I had flicked off on the living room rug that afternoon, knelt down, and held my hands over my head so he could wrestle my shirt back on. It took just about all the strength I could muster to keep my head lifted enough so he could get it through the hole. "Lie down," I remember him saying. I felt limp with confusion and then struggled to hold onto the floor as the world spun around me faster, more merry-go-round by the minute. The shadows did their graceful ballet on the ceiling as he threaded each of my legs down into my jeans, zipped and buttoned up my jeans around my waist, scrunched on my socks and slipped on my sneaks. I mumbled, "Wait, man, I don't want to. I don't go. It's not fair, man. We were gonna stick together, man. I promised him. You gotta let me stay." "Jared, how about this?" he began, now in a condescending tone I'd come to expect from adults. "How about I take you someplace none of those monsters ever would?" "No, keep me here, man. I'm serious. I'll break your stuff. I'll kill you," I said, losing all sense of place. "Forgive me. This is for your own good." I didn't actually start phasing out until after he had taped my arms behind my back, my legs together at the ankles, and my mouth shut. There was little I could do to protest it. All my gripes came out as groans. I felt a rush of cold night air for a minute, and everything went black. But I could still make out the floodlights as he carried me across the driveway. Light streaks burned my eyes and bobbled about in circles as every bit of food that wasn't in my stomach began surging forward in a dry heave that left only streams of spit dripping off the sides of my cheeks. I was being carried in his strong arms out to his car. He placed me in his back seat. And as we rolled along, I saw the glow of the streetlights out the opposite window shuffle their beams over the seat where I lay sick as a dog all over again. One beam after another graced the inside of the car as if some spirit were shooting through every 100 feet. I moaned and wrestled about back there the whole time, gnawing through the duct tape, but all I could do was throw my shoulders around to try to wriggle them from the binds. I moaned a few screams and tried to lift my head. But didn't finally fall under until I figured there was no use in fighting it anymore.